What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Garage Topics. Today's video is dedicated to tips and tricks I learned when swapping out my steering wheel and turn signal switch on this Bronco. I had a lot of weird issues and persevered, go me, but I got some tips that I want to share because I don't want to hoard this information to myself. If this is your first time watching, thanks a lot. If you like the video, feel free to subscribe at the end. I've got a ton more videos coming on this classic Bronco, and I've got a bunch more vehicles behind me in this garage. There's a huge project in itself. Why I started to do this? Because I needed to get this Bronco registered. In order to do that in Kentucky, you have to make sure your turn signals work and your lights work. Crazy, other states are way more strict, but that's about it. But for me, the turn signals didn't work, the horn didn't work, so I needed to get to this. First thing that I needed to fix was the wiring for the turn switch. So this is the old unit, it's really crusty, really gross. I think it's been changed out before because all the wiring underneath the dash is being changed out and didn't look anything like I've seen online for the equivalent stock wiring. What happens with this is that the turn signal just didn't work. It would just get hung up. It wouldn't actually return. So when you turn signal left and you go to turn right after it, it wouldn't turn off. You'd have to manually do it. It would just flop around. It's like a wet noodle. The new unit replaced it. What you have to do is you have to pull the steering wheel, which for me required renting a puller from a local auto parts store. That allows you to pull the stock wheel off. That gives you access to all the bolts to take all the guts out of the steering column, which will get you to this point. This wiring feeds down the column. There's a specific slit that it goes down. You just want to take your time doing that. And as you can see, this actually connects to a black metal plastic connector. It's too big, it won't fit through the columns. You have to depin it to get all the wires individual, pull it out, put the new one back in, repin it, you're good to go. As far as putting this through, wasn't too hard. Once I realized there was a dedicated passageway on the column for this wiring to go in, everything was pretty much straightforward. But you'll see how the old one came in, just put it back and you'll be good to go. I got mine from Tom's Bronco Parts. I'll put a link in the description. Quick thing to note, 73 and older, actually send power through the column. So you're actually making a physical connection of power in the column, which is kind of sketch, but whatever. Later ones, 74 and up, I only had one prong here, and that meant it was just a ground switch, which meant that all the wiring was underneath the dash. So it makes it a little bit more complicated. The next part of this was replacing the steering wheel. Didn't need to, but this stock steering wheel is effing massive, and it would touch my legs. It's huge. I've always wanted a wood steering wheel in a Bronco, and so here we are. I bought this from Holly.com. It's one of Scott Drake lines of wheels. It's a 9-bolt hole. People use these in Mustangs as well. I think it looks really good. I actually went with the plastic horn button. I first bought a billet horn button, but it looked way too flashy. So I swapped it out. It matches the panel on the dash a lot nicer with that plastic and plastic. I think it looks great. But I had some troubles installing this, so let me show you. Originally, I thought I bought the wrong adapter. Reason being is that the column adapter that I bought for the wheel, there was such a huge gap between it and the stock column that I thought something must be off. In addition to that, those two prongs I showed you actually need to make contact with the back of the hub adapter. That hub adapter, depending on what year Bronco you have, has either one or two contact patches, which means that those prongs are always touching the back of the hub adapter, which allows the horn to actually activate it. Since this is a 73, I have two prongs on that turn signal switch, which means there's two separate rings on the back of the hub that need to be touching those prongs at all times. Mine weren't. When I pressed the wheel on with the bolt, it wouldn't touch it either. I thought that would get it close enough. It was just barely off. What I ended up having to do was, and I found this deep in a message board forum, so I really appreciate who posted this. What you have to do is actually take bolts out of the column. There are two bolts underneath the column here, and there are two underneath the hood. What that enables you to do is that this shaft of the steering column can actually move back and forth. It still keeps the steering wheel in the same position. This will stay fixed, but this will move back and forth. And what that enabled me to do is, with the 4 bolts loose, get pressure and push up and move this whole column up, which meant that that back prong touched the back of the housing. You have to do that quickly because there's tension in a spring when you put it all together. You'll see what I'm talking about in some of these other videos. I'll put a link for those in the description. They help me out a ton. You fiddle with that. What I did is I had one hand hold the column against that spring pressure, and the other hand I had a electric ratchet to zip the bolts underneath the dash to get the column to stay in place. And now they're really tight right up on that back ring, as you can see. And then this ring here is held on by Allen keys. It actually slips over and covers this gap. I just bolted it to where it's at to show you guys what's going on. But you can see those two rings, and you can see those two prongs touch it, which means my horn works. And once I figured this out, it was a huge relief. So hopefully this helps someone out there installing an aftermarket steering wheel in a Bronco. If they don't touch, you can manipulate the steering column to fix yourself. Almost forgot to call this out in the video. This turn signal return ring was pivotal in putting on your aftermarket hub to make sure that when you had the turn signals one way and turn the wheel to go straight again, it would cancel it out. What you do is you take it off of the original steering wheel and you put it on the hub. The hub should have two little metal rings to hold it in place. I used a vise to actually clamp it on there because it was very tight, but once you use the vise, you've got it like this, and you can see that allows you to actually touch the mechanism of the turn signal switch as such. So your turn signal should work even better now. So that was my tips and tricks of installing that steering wheel and the turn signal, wiring, etc. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. I'll try to answer them, or shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I figured if anyone watching this is probably interested in Broncos and the future of this Bronco, so behind me I have a ton of parts. I'm going to quickly show you what's going on with them just to give a sneak peek in the future. By no means is this a full review of the products. It's just going to show you what's to come in this Bronco. All right, these two boxes back here, fully loaded with EFI componentry. Sniper is synonymous in EFI conversions in old classic vehicles. I could have gone that route, and I'm familiar with that route. Holley actually sells a unit called a Terminator X Stealth. So Terminator X is their ECU, super awesome deal ECU system. They also make one that has a throttle body, which is what I have here. So this looks like a carburetor. It's super nice. When it has an air filter on it, you probably won't be able to tell what's going on, but which is the whole point of it. It's called Stealth. This will allow me to have EFI running this whole engine Bronco, and because the ECU is separate and I have a Terminator X Max, I'll be able to control a transmission in the future if I want to. To make this run even better, Holley sells Hyperspark, which is their own version of their distributor, ignition coil, and ignition box. This will allow you to have more advanced timing and work seamlessly with the ECU, so super stoked for this. I'm going to have to do an intake manifold. I'm going to have to run some new plumbing and wiring, and I have to do a separate gas tank install, fuel pump, etc. But I'll buy those later, and I'll do a whole video because I think these Terminator X Stealth units are the way to go. Especially if you plan on doing aftermarket transmission control in the future, such as overdrive, etc. This is where your money's best bet. All right, in this box is a bunch of restoration parts. If you're watching this video in March of 2023, Holley is doing a clearance sale, so a lot of these things are really cheap right now. I've got a bunch of gaskets, so the upper doors, the lower doors, the whole windshield trim, are all on sale. I didn't necessarily need these front marker lamps, but they were dirt cheap. They sell the whole housing together. That's still always going to be for sale, but these like individual lamps are going away. Just won't be able to buy them at Holley.com. So got those. Also got the gaskets that come with them. Got this little bezel removal tool. So this allows you to get those trim rings off of the dashboard pull levers, etc., without scratching it up. It's a pretty neat little tool. So I don't need it right now, but I'll need it in the future. Let's take a tour over here to look at some more parts. All right, so these I don't necessarily need right now, but it was a killer deal. I have full left and right passenger and driver lower quarter panels uncut. So you can kind of see them in there. Mine have got some serious rust, so I wanted to either replace the whole panel or do some patchwork, and I got these metal panels for cheap, so I've got them just in case I need them. Last but not least, I got a full rubber floor interior mat kit. So I was torn between carpet and rubber, and going with rubber, I'm going to do a whole series on that. People on the internet complain about rust and things like that. That is a concern, but I'm going to do what I can to make sure that won't happen. And honestly, that Bronco is going to spend most of the life in the garage as long as I can help it. So not too worried about rust. This is just some of the parts. Like what's going to happen next in this Bronco is that whole passenger side, if you looked at the last video, has serious issues. The passenger door barely hangs on. I need to get working on that. That's the first big project I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna have to replace the whole A-pillar, the kick panel, maybe even the lower rocker panel. It's gonna be a big job, but it comes with the territory on getting these Broncos unless you pay big money for one that's already been done. So it looks okay from out here, but all underneath here is garbage. Let's see if I can get you down in here. Yeah, you're not supposed to be able to see that hole. That's part of the floor plan, but the whole A-pillar that holds the hinges for the door needs to be replaced, the kick panel that touches it, the rocker panel that touches it, etc., etc., etc. It can snowball, but I'm gonna try and keep it real because I want this to be a driver. This isn't some Barrett Jackson auction queen. I'm gonna drive the piss out of this, and I wanna have fun with it sooner rather than later. So we'll get up and running. I'll document the whole process, or at least give my tips and tricks on how I did it. But I'm excited to tear into this and get working. But if you see this in the background in the future videos I do on the other cars in the garage, you'll know what I'm working on.